we're going to start our review of our Project MRS with its 1ZZ as it sits. I just wanted to make a quick review video about the MRS with its stock motor before we go through the whole engine swap process and change everything about the car. So I'll be able to give a more accurate representation of what you would get if you buy an MRS out of the box. Before we start the review, I will say that this car is lowered on Touge S-Techs with KYB struts, and it also has a thicker white line adjustable front sway bar with spherical end links. And the front sway bar is on its stiffest setting, mainly so that we can get more rear traction and corner exit grip and more stability. So as far as handling goes, in this video, I'm going to describe the car in its stock form as I've driven it before, and it's not how it drives right now. As far as first impressions, when you first get into the MRS, you would of course notice the interior room and have to adjust your seat and all that. Most people would say this car is fairly small, especially for the American market. Although it is smaller, I have to say I feel like this car has more open space, especially in the center area where a center transmission tunnel would normally be in, say, the Miata S2000 and SW20. And this is mainly because the car is mid-ship or mid-engine, so there isn't a transmission here, so there's no need for that tunnel that's normally in most two-seater front-engine cars. As some of you guys know, the SW20 also had like that fighter jet center console thing, and this car doesn't. So you have a lot of space between you and the passenger, and there's actually an open space on the floor here in front and where you can see the carpet. Next, I'll talk about the pedal placement and pedal field. In this car, and also my older MR2, the throttle pedal is a little bit sticky and not as light as I'd want it to be, and it makes it feel like the car isn't as responsive as it could be. Compared to its rival, the Miata, the throttle pedal doesn't have that light flickability that you can do with the Miata. It's a little bit harder to heel and toe in this car, and you have to leave your foot on the pedal a little bit longer. The gas pedal is sunken in a little deeper than the brake pedal, so you have to brake pretty hard or turn your foot a lot to heel and toe in this car. But overall, the pedals are close enough where you can easily heel and toe with the roll of the foot, as opposed to having to turn your whole foot horizontally. Next up, I'll talk about the clutch and shifter feel. The clutch just feels like a normal clutch to me, nothing notable or weird. The shifter feel is the same, it's nothing unique compared to its sportier competitors. I don't think the shifter feel is as sporty as a Miata or an S2000. The shifter throws a little bit longer and just like your normal stick shift car. But that's not to say it's bad, it's just not as sporty as its Japanese roadster competitors. Next, I'll talk about the handling. Overall arching factor that influences the handling of the MRS is that it's really lightweight. The car is only 2,195 pounds, so all your inputs are sensitive because it doesn't have a lot of inertia behind it, and it really does what you want it to do, I think. I think this is one of the best handling cars I've ever driven, and if you follow this channel, you know I also have an S2000 and a Miata, which are also considered some of the best handling cars around, especially for Japanese roadsters. As far as driver confidence, I feel just as confident throwing this car into a corner like a Miata, and actually I think it gives more confidence than my S2000, and that's mainly because I think this car communicates just a little bit better. People might argue with me, and of course I think handling is all subjective and based on preference, but I do think that this car is easier to throw into corners than the S2000, even though I think maybe the S2000 is faster overall in corners, and that's mainly due to our medium speed corner, high speed corner, mainly because it has the double A-arm suspension, double wishbone suspension, which is also in the Miata, and this car doesn't have that. This car has the McPherson strut type suspension, so in that way it falls a little bit short, but if you had no idea what the suspension type of this car was, you would still think that this car handles amazing. Of course, this car is mid-ship, so it has that unique characteristic, and a lot of people associate mid-engine and the MR2 with snap oversteer because of all the internet rumors and all that, but a lot of people that say snap oversteer, especially regarding the MRS, I think haven't driven one. Coming from my old SW20 that I owned, this car doesn't have snap oversteer, and that's mainly due to the fact, I think, that of course it has a more modern suspension, being a more modern car, but it also has a lot less weight in the back compared to the SW20. The SW20 has that iron block 3S GTE, which is iron block turbo, and a lot heavier than this, which is a 1ZZ 1.8 liter. So it has a lot less weight swinging back there to throw the car off balance in a corner or throw the rear end to make it want to come around. So it doesn't have that whip effect that the SW20 is known for. As far as steering feel, the steering is really light. It has a unique electronic hydraulic power steering system as opposed to an electronic power steering. So that means there's an electronic pump that powers a hydraulic system, because the steering of course is in the front and the engine's in the back, so you can't connect the motor to power the hydraulic pump. The steering assist makes the steering really light, which it probably is already light on its own because there's no weight in the front. And a lot of people actually disable the power steering because it's so light. In my opinion, I think light steering is really nice because you're able to catch a slide and all that quick without too much effort. You don't have to like flop around like you do with a heavier steering setup. Compared to say the S2000, there still has that hydraulic delay if you're going through a slalom and really jerking the wheel. Of course, you're probably turning the wheel too fast, but compared to like the S2000's electronic power steering, it still has that little delay and then catch, as opposed to the constant tossability of an electronic power steering system. As far as drivetrain, this car is a 2003 MRS and it doesn't have an LSD. Unfortunately, it's open diff. I think the later models come with an LSD, so you can't really do a lot of throttle adjustment to make it oversteer and stuff as you would with the car with the locking LSD. So that's a little bit lame compared to the S2000 and Miata, but you can get one for the later models, and of course you can source an aftermarket for this. Next, I'll talk about the power delivery and the power of the car. The car right now has a 1ZZ, which has 138 horsepower and I think 120 something torque. Since we're driving the car and you can just look up those power figures, I'll just say that the car feels like it has, what little power it has is always readily available, and of course that's due to the lightweight and the car's actual power band. No matter what RPM you're at, it feels pretty peppy and just wants to get up and go. Especially compared to my S2000, I actually think that mid-range this car is a little bit more peppy and you can really zip in and out of traffic and off of stoplights quicker than the S2000. You don't have to wind up this motor to get the power that you need, even though it doesn't have that much of it. I would compare it to the FRS or BRZ actually, if any of you have driven that. It's a very flat, consistent power curve. So that's all I have to say about power and power delivery. Lastly, which is just as important as all the characteristics, is the braking. This car brakes really well, mainly because it is lightweight. It doesn't have anything spectacular. It's a four-wheel ventilated disc system with ABS. I do have to say the ABS does kick in a little bit too early for my liking. I feel like the car has more to give as far as braking. So that wraps up my overall impression review here, just driving the car along. I hope it was able to give you a good impression of how the car is driving it, and now we'll do a little bit faster driving session and give our impressions after that. Alright guys, looks like we've come across an FRS that's been, oh, look at him go. He's driving a little crazy. I don't do that stuff, but looks like he does. So the GTI got out of the way. Let's see if we can find this FRS. If he was going at that rate he was going, he's probably pretty far away, and I don't want to go too fast. Coming up on the windy part, I think that might be him. Yeah, it looks like it's the FRS. So it looks like he might have waited for us on this windy section. He looks like he's going to come behind us.
We need to get to the way.
caught the FRS, and I guess he waited for us. He's a cool dude. We got him on Instagram. I think his car was pretty much all stock, so it was a little bit hard for it to keep up. And this is a lot lighter, so we didn't have to brake much at the turns. But I guess that gives a good impression on how the car handles. I wasn't driving, of course, that was Takumi driving. But yeah, the car is really easy to attack the corners, and as long as you're on throttle going through the corner and you do your braking earlier, the car won't get upset at all. Midship people always say like you have to brake sooner and then you can accelerate sooner. You can actually attack the corner and brake into the corner, I think, with this car. Just be ready to catch it in a little slide if you need to. We didn't slide at all on that because Takumi wasn't pushing that hard. So the car's really easy to drive, has a lot of potential for those back roads. We had no power, but we didn't have to brake. So once we do get power, we're gonna be able to pull pretty hard on those straightaways and coming out of the turns. And I think this car's handling and stopping power is a great match. Obviously, all you guys that follow me probably watch Hot Version, see that MRS go really fast. So yeah, car's great, platform to buy, guys. It's dirt cheap right now. They've bottomed out on that depreciation curve and they're about to spike right up. And I think after doing these videos, they might go up in value. So might be a good time to jump on them. Actually, if you're planning to swap MRS, you might be better off buying one with a blown engine. A lot of them have this issue with the pre-cats where the catalytic converter on the header will crumble and then it gets sucked in from the exhaust side. So there are actually a lot of these with blown motors, and it might be why these aren't as popular as the Miata right now. But as long as you got that cat, which we've already done, I think the car is totally reliable. It hasn't been burning oil or anything, and it's got like 130,000 miles. So yeah, overall, even in its 1ZZ form, this car is a great platform for anyone to build on. I really think it is that poor man's lease. I mean, you're talking like, this car was $3,000, so 10 times cheaper right now as it sits. There really isn't any other car you can get like this for that price range, and with 2 airbags from the 2000s. So yeah, that concludes our video, and I guess we had Takumi had to appear for a surprise battle with an FRS, and this thing fended itself off with a good margin with economy tires. So good job to Takumi driving with Kumhos. And that concludes the review.
All right, there's the car. Stay slow, stay slow.